The market for budget-friendly 75% and TKL layout mechanical keyboards has lots of options these days, so it takes a unique design or unique features to really stand out. Today we're checking out the Kemove K87, a TKL keyboard with quiet linear switches, a replaceable battery, and unique RGB lighting, all for around $100. Before we dive in, I want to mention that Kemove sent me the K87 for the purpose of making a review. I was not paid to make this video, and all opinions shared will be my own. I do have an Amazon affiliate link down in the description for you though if you're interested in picking up the K87 and you'd like to support this channel. So what makes the Kemove K87 unique among other TKL options? Well, in my opinion, Kemove has made a few good decisions here because they didn't go for something really flashy or gimmicky to try and make it different from the competition. They went for a couple of touches like an RGB lighting strip in the front and a user replaceable battery, so things that aren't really downsides if they don't appeal to you. But things aren't quite perfect just yet, so let's start with a breakdown of the features and specs of the K87, then we'll talk about pros and cons. The Kemove K87 is a TKL or 80% layout keyboard with 87 keys and an ANSI layout. The construction is ABS plastic and the dimensions are 365 by 139 by 36 millimeters and the weight is 1,700 grams or 3 pounds. There are 2 position fold-out feet for a total of 3 typing angles. There currently appears to be just one color option, which is blue with keycaps that include white alpha keys and blue and gray accent keys. The internals include several layers of sound dampening, including silicone padding in the case bottom, foam between the PCB and the plate, and a switch pad. The PCB is hot swappable and compatible with 3 and 5 pin switches. Switch options include red, brown, and silver switches, with the brown being a tactile option and the silver being a linear option with lighter actuation force and shorter travel. Connectivity includes Bluetooth for 3 devices, 2.4 GHz, and USB-C wired. The Kemove website did not indicate polling rates for the connections, but indicates a latency of only 1 millisecond for the wired connection. Battery capacity is 4,000 mAh, and Kemove estimates 12 days of use with the backlighting on, or up to 6 months of use with the lighting turned off. Lighting includes north-facing RGB for all keys and an LED light strip on the front side of the case. The keycaps are not shine-through, but any MX-style shine-through keycaps should provide good illumination due to the north-facing LEDs. There are 15 different RGB modes, and the front LED strip is controlled separately by key command. The keycaps are PBT in a profile similar to OEM and have front-facing sub-legends for key functions such as the lighting and wireless connection commands. The K87 does not have QMK firmware, but can be customized with Kemove's driver software. However, at the time of recording, it is only available for Windows. Switching between the wireless modes and the operating system layout can be done with switches on the bottom of the keyboard. The K87 is available on Kemove's website for a price of $119 US, which is frequently discounted to $99, and it's also available on Amazon for $99 US. The K87 is also available in an SE model, which is a wired-only version for a price of $49. All right, now let's talk about some pros and cons of the K87. And of course, we'll start with the pros. The build quality here is quite good. It is all plastic, but it feels solid, not too lightweight or hollow. It's got a pretty good weight to it. I would say the case materials here are at least as good, if not slightly better, than most of the EpoMaker all plastic keyboards that I've tested. Another pro would be the wireless connectivity, and in my experience, it works pretty well. I had no issues with the Bluetooth connection, and the 2.4 GHz is pretty good. I would say it is pretty much middle of the road as far as 2.4 GHz performance overall of keyboards that I've tested that have this connection. It's not quite as strong as the recent Keychron keyboards that I've tried with 2.4 GHz, including the K3 Max, V1 Max, and V5 Max. With the K87, I found the range to be pretty good. I was able to use it at a distance distance of up to 3.5-ish feet away from the keyboard to where I connected it to my dock. However, when you have obstacles or some obstructions in the way, in the line of sight to the receiver, that's where I found a little bit of inconsistency with the connection. So certainly not disappointing, just you do have to watch out for the obstructions in the line of sight to the receiver. Next up, overall, the typing feel and sound that you're getting with the K87 is quite nice. Kemove sent me the red linear switches, and they have a relatively quiet sound, but they're not high-pitched, they're not pingy, just a nice, subtle sound. The feel of the switches is also nice and smooth, and the keycaps have a nice texture to them. Overall, I'm pretty satisfied with this sound and feel, but there is one thing about the keycaps. It's actually about the profile of the keycaps, and it's not the keycaps themselves that are the issue, but the choice of the profile with this keyboard. I'll talk about that more in a minute in the cons section. I will point out though that the typing feel is more on the firm side, so this doesn't have that like really bouncy or flexible feel. It has a little bit more of a firm feel. You'll see while you're typing, there's not very much, flex that you're gonna get. So as long as you're okay with that, then I think you'll find it overall pretty satisfying. Another pro would be the RGB lighting. There's a lot to like here. So the light strip on the front gives you a little something different than other keyboards. The only downside here is that this front strip might get covered up by a wrist rest, which unfortunately I think a lot of people will need with the K87 because the front height here is pretty tall. So I personally think you do need a wrist rest unless you happen to be normally seated in a position where your arms are high up above the table and you kind of float above the keyboard and type like this, but it's still a nice touch, and overall the RGB lighting I think is well executed. Another pro would be the battery and the battery life. So the battery capacity is good at 4,000 milliamp hour, and the battery life is quoted as up to 6 months with the backlighting turned off. That's pretty incredible, so this must be some pretty efficient firmware they have here. I don't know if it will actually last 6 months with the backlighting off, but even if it only lasted half that time, that's still really good. And the special feature with the battery is that they've put it in a compartment here. It's basically like, any device that uses regular alkaline or lithium batteries where you just pop it open and replace the batteries. They put the battery in this little removable compartment here so that the user can easily replace it. If you ever get to a point where it doesn't hold a charge well anymore, they've made it easy for you to replace that battery pack without having to disassemble the whole keyboard. And that's something not a lot of manufacturers have done. All right, now let's talk about cons here. Now, for a price of around $100, there's not that many cons here, but there are a couple, and unfortunately for me, they're kind of a big deal. But they may not be a big deal for everybody, so let's talk about it. First up, the firmware is not QMK, so you're not able to do your customization with tools that support multiple keyboards like VIA or the open source Vial configurator. I would personally prefer that, but Kemove does have their own customization software. However, the experience is a little confusing here, at least right now. It's January 2024 when I'm recording this, and if you go to Kemove's website and look at the download section for the driver software to customize your K87, you'll notice the K87 model is only mentioned next to the options for Windows. There is no Mac version that lists the K87 right now. There was only one piece of Mac software available to download, so just to see if it would work, I did download that, and alas, that particular piece of software doesn't work with the K87 model, which it doesn't say that it does, but since that was the only Mac option available, I wanted to try it out, and no luck. So unfortunately, if you buy the K87 or the K87 SE, which is the wired-only version of the K87, you're only going to be able to customize it on a Windows machine currently. Now that can change in the future because software can always change and be updated, or there could be a Mac version released, which I hope there is. But right now, you're kind of out of luck if you don't have access to a Windows machine. The other main con that I have here is also something that may not impact everyone in the same way. And this is actually the first time I've ever mentioned a con like this about a keyboard that I've reviewed, and it has to do with ergonomics. My issue is the front height of this keyboard is quite high. Take a look at it side by side next to the Newfie Halo 75 and just look at the difference between how high up the front edge of the keyboard is between the two. Now, the number difference in terms of the measurement between them that's on the screen may not seem like that big of a deal, but in my opinion, my experience, if you normally type with your arms resting on the desk, meaning your hands have to be at an upward angle to rest on your keyboard, then that does actually generate a little bit of an issue here, because even with a wrist rest here, I still found that the combination of that front height and the height of the keycaps together made for a somewhat uncomfortable typing position for long typing periods. And I tried it in all three positions, flat and then the two adjustable feet positions. And I never really got to the same comfort level that I normally get with other keyboards. For anybody that normally leans their wrists and their arms on the desk, I think a shorter keycap profile would actually be a little more comfortable here. I just wanted to point that out because I've never really run into this with another keyboard where in any position the front height creates a little bit of an uncomfortable angle, even with my wrist rest in place. I only have one other con to point out here for the K87, and again, it's something that doesn't affect everybody. And this would be for anybody who uses both Mac and Windows and switches back and forth between them regularly. The K87 does have pre-programmed Mac and Windows layouts that you can switch back and forth between, but the switch to do that is on the bottom of the keyboard. You actually have to flip it over, at least tilt it upwards, to find the switch here and change it back and forth between Mac and Windows. And the switch for changing between wired and wireless connections is also here, so having to flip my keyboard over to do that, it's a little bit annoying. I don't find it to be a deal breaker, but I would prefer if it was on the side or the back so I don't have to like flip over my keyboard every time I need to do that. And as far as cons go, that's really it. There's nothing else here that I see as a significant issue or deal breaker, especially considering we're at the $100 price point here. And I recognize none of those cons apply equally to everybody in the same way. For me though, not being able to customize it on Mac and my issue with the front height and the sort of ergonomics of that mean I personally wouldn't pick the K87 for myself. But if those issues are non-issues for you, if none of those things really sound like a problem for you, then actually the K87 is a pretty good choice and I would recommend considering it if you're looking right around the $100 price point. So I would take a look at the K87 and compare it to other options from say EpoMaker and Keychron, because you can get some options in the either 75% or TKL layout right around the same price point and have very similar features. And from there, it's really going to come down to personal choice between the design styles, the RGB lighting, which you've got a little bit nicer RGB lighting on the K87 than options from EpoMaker and Keychron. But with Keychron, you might be able to get something in the VMAX series that does have QMK with VIA support for all operating systems. One of the big pros here compared to the competition is going to be the battery life. If it really does last 6 months, or like I said, even half that amount of time, that's going to be better than a lot of other options at this price point with the same feature set. So that'll do it for this video. Let me know what you think of the K87 from Kemove. Let me know down in the comments if you have one and how you're liking it. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe to the Semi-Pro Tech and Gear channel. And hey, why don't you check out this video right here? I am sure you will like it. Thanks everybody. See you next time.